us about how many churches have been bounded sets and why we need to be center sets. But you have to describe what that is first. Who wants to swing away?
Well, maybe I'll start off here. And this concept is from Paul Hebert, and he's a missiologist, one of my heroes, by the way, just a really creative kind of guy. And he loved, he was a missionary kid, but he also loved mathematics. So that's where some of this comes out of. Let me start off with our definition of intercultural evangelism, where it's the process of putting Christ at the center of someone's worldview in order to initiate them into Christian discipleship through culturally relevant starting points. Okay, so there's a lot of chunks in there, but the one we're talking about right now is putting Christ at the center of someone's worldview. So what'll happen if we don't change the worldview, then Christianity becomes an overlay that you just put on top of an existing worldview, and it doesn't transform someone. So like James K. Smith says, you become what you love, not just what you think. If we make Christianity just something else that you think, then what happens is if you still love the things of the world, guess how you act? You still act like people of the world. So the real goal of this is to allow Christ to be at the center of someone's life so that all they do is directed towards that center. And that is a process that's always a direction that you're moving that you never graduate from. So instead of discipleship being a program you graduate from, the centered thinking means that every day I'm continuing to have decisions where I can either put Christ in the center or myself. Now, the difference from a bounded set thinking is that people would think when somebody comes to Christ, they have to cross over a boundary line. So the boundary line has to be clearly defined. And interestingly enough, churches define that line in different ways. Some churches say you say a certain prayer, and once you cross over that line, you're in, and then you're inside the kingdom. For some people, it's like once you speak in tongues, then you're in. For others, it's a baptism. There's lots of different markers. And the funny thing is, Jesus never gave a clear boundary line like that everybody has to jump over. But churches like to make that clear boundary line so that once you have stepped over that line, then you're in the group, but before that, you're out. The funny thing is with that is that people often will say, well, I prayed a certain prayer when I was 15, but if you look at the direction of their life right now, I would hate to give them assurance of salvation based upon what they did 15 years ago. So the centered set says your salvation is not based on what you've done in the past. It's all based on the direction you're moving right now. Instead of thinking of boundary lines that you need to cross over, think of the direction that your life is moving in. Are you taking all you know of yourself to all you know of Christ and moving in the direction of putting Christ at the center as opposed to putting yourself at the center? And that's the goal of evangelism. So when you ask people in the bounded set, you have to ask them a question like, have you ever prayed to receive Christ? But in the centered set, you would ask questions like, are you moving closer to Jesus or further away? Would you like to move closer to Jesus? See, those second set of questions sound more like a friend would ask another friend, like a spiritual mentor would ask another. Whereas when you have to ask the bounded set questions, it's more like you're trying to get a notch on your belt, like say, would you like to cross over and now pray this prayer with me today? So that concept, it's really about direction of movement, that people focus on the direction they're moving, as opposed to the boundary line they cross over. And that's why Paul Hebert developed that type of thinking from the mathematics world, is how do you group things into sets? Either they're in boundary lines or they're in movement directions. And that's the crux of it.